and welcome back to the Phase podcast. I'm Emily, and this is the final episode in our series on building resilience. We've talked so far about what resilience is and how we can build it, but especially as parents, or also as youth workers or friends, we want to think about how we can help those around us to build resilience as well. In this episode, we discuss how we can build a culture that promotes resilient mindset and models key strategies of resilience. So obviously two of you here, Kieran and Erica, you're both parents, but also all of us are in positions where we work with children and young people. Also, we're around friends, we're around family, we're around people. And so we've talked about resilience, we've talked about what it might look like, how we build it, but how do we model that to the people around us and help them to grow in it as well?
Yeah, it's tough. Being a parent, I've got two children, Lily and Daniel. Lily is 6, Daniel is 4, and it is really tough because I've got two things going on at the same time in my head. One, I talk about this stuff every day, and so I want to help my children build that, but I also love them dearly, and I want to protect them, and I realise that those two things don't always go together, and so one of the things that we talked earlier about. Questioning and the yet and the fein. I try really hard, even with my little boy. Daniel was only 4. I try really hard for him to sort of really engage those problem solving skills. If he wants something, instead of me sort of running off to get it for him, it's simple as, okay, well, where do you think it is? And he's like, I don't know. Well, have you looked? Okay, well, you go and look, and then if you can't find it, come back to Daddy. And then we can go look, and it's some of those little bits, or even my daughter's faced challenges. Just she's grown up, relationships and friendships. That all starts as soon as they start to go to school. There's a part of me that wants to protect her from that, but the other part is actually that's part of life. She's got to learn how to communicate with others, with her peers. She's got to learn how to communicate with her brother. She's got to learn how to communicate with her parents. And so just sometimes instead of trying to remove the problem, actually helping her to explore and talk about it. And a big thing, actually, I probably we really work on at home. It's just vocabulary. Actually, trying to give them the words to express and talk about this at age-appropriate levels. But that's something I think is really important, because if I can help them do that now, and also like Claire and I as parents, that helps us being able to talk about it. And I mentioned some of the things, having lost my mum and some health things. I've tried really hard to appropriately talk about that with my children, so they learn some of those skills, so they're seeing mummy and daddy do that as well as then asking them. So I don't want them to be doing something I'm not doing.
Yeah. And I agree. It's that sort of managed risk taking, and like as parents, you do want to kind of rush in and think that a little bit you know best, you know how to fix it, but actually you do need to try and empower your children, especially with Jack. He's 9, helping him learn what he should do. And we sometimes go, well, let's problem solve.
Yeah.
Okay. And we can come up with really daft examples, which makes them laugh. But then we sort of, I leave it to them to come up with, okay, so what do you think you will do about this? And give them that tool. And also the other thing with me is just me and my kids is really trying to instill that sort of growth mindset, that mistakes are sensible, they're normal. It's what you learn. It's your first attempt at learning. There is no such thing as failure. And being really careful about the language that I use around them. Something that doesn't shut things down but opens things up. Trying to use more open questions with them. And you're right about, Kieran, about the vocabulary as well, trying to give them that and explaining sometimes, I don't always get it right. So trying to model that behaviour a little bit is if I've had a bad day, or if they see me crying, I sort of go, oh, I'm sorry, Mummy's just really sad today. I had a bit of bad news, or this is happening. So kind of explain to them, don't shut myself away emotionally from them.
Yeah.
But bring them in and explain what's happening in my life and why I'm feeling happy today, or why I'm this way. And I think that then just it gives them more of a model that they can talk about them with me.
Yeah. What I like about the problem solving, letting your kids problem solve, I remember reading it somewhere, is also it gives them it shows them, oh, I can solve this myself. You trust me to solve this myself, so I feel confident that I can, and it's okay if I get it wrong. But whereas if we always fix things for kids, they have that almost helpless feeling where, I always have to look to somebody else to fix it because I don't feel confident that I can resolve this myself. And that carries on to adulthood, obviously.
And sometimes it is so much easier to just jump right in.
One of the things I often reflect on is that, we Google everything, and what that does, it stops me having to remember, because I can go back and Google it. And so one of the things I try really hard, whether it's at home, at work, in school, wherever I am, is if somebody comes to me with a problem, I'll say, well, what do you think? Because actually I realise that in life we end up getting to this point of, like, I've got a problem, somebody else has the answer. Whereas, I think pushing, again, I do it with my children, if I do it with a team when I'm in schools, getting people to think, well, what is your solution? Doesn't necessarily mean that your solution is right, but if you thought about it, that in a sense, part of that growth, it's that problem solving, it's that, okay, I've got some agency here to be able to do something. But I can also take here's my 2 or 3 solutions, that's all I've been able to come up with. What do you think? That's great, because then you've got something to work with and say, okay, well, how did you get to that? What does that look like? Let's think that through. And it's one of the things I try really hard to do, and even if I catch myself trying to get somebody else to give me the answer, is to stop and think about that and think with the children, because that's that you won't always have somebody around you, so you've got to be able to at some point come up with at least some solutions. They might be terrible, but at least you've got something to do. Which that comfortably uncomfortable.
Erica, I know you shared that your experience earlier in the beginning of lockdown with your mum dying and a lot of that pressure, and I wondered how your kids showed resilience in that time, or how you modelled that resilience to them.
Okay, so the first part of it was trying to fix myself, and then when we moved to Hitchin, certainly my son really lost his sense of identity and self. He'd changed school, and he hadn't even started school, he hadn't said goodbye to any of his friends. The future for the first time for him was a blur. He had no idea, he couldn't picture it. And so I think for me there was a number of things. We had a worry monster, which is like journaling, writing down, externalizing what it was that was worrying him. That was a good one. He was very emotional. His emotions were brewing at the top all the time. And in school he'd been taught you step away from a situation. The problem there was he spent the majority of the time locked in toilets. Now we have 4 toilets in our house. And so trying to even locate which toilet he was locked in was always a bit of a challenge. And so we had to give him that space to calm down. And I gave him grounding tools, which worked so effectively at just him trying to regain control over his emotions. And they were simplified, like 4 colours, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can hear, 1 thing you can smell. Just so that and he said that really helped him. And then I did, rather than focusing on his schoolwork, I ordered the Big Life Journal online even, and we went through that, and we shared stories and inspirational stories, and we talked about it, and we did colouring and mindfulness about, what's one big change that you can make, what's one thing you can do to make yourself feel better. So that sort of mixture of different things. And that's the other thing, we also did what went well today at the end of the day, as I was putting him to bed. What was your one thing that went well? What was your favourite thing today? Try and putting him to bed in a sort of more positive mindset after all the worries. And the school, I also asked for help from the schools that he was about to go to, and they were brilliant. They were so good, and they kept checking in on him for the first sort of term, and he really appreciated that, because for him it was a big change, and he's so happy now. He's so well adjusted. He's got a lovely set of school friends.
So it's actually a lot of those same things that you talked about, the control, the perspective, the positivity, but just modelling those and also doing
down
them
to his level in a way that he could understand it. And I'd say it's made the world of difference.
Having other families around you as well, I think having other parents in similar situations, partly sometimes that's just to offload, like, oh man, today's been tough. And other times it's, you're within a family unit, they often say that logic is low, emotion is high. So when you've got those friends around you, that's where your logic is higher and your emotion is less, because they're not as emotionally involved in that situation as you. And that's another way of, again, you being resilient isn't always about having the right answer, but it's knowing where do I have to look to, who do I have to call upon. So those problem solving skills, that connection. So I think that's some of the key bit really, and being open, communicating, talking about it. That is probably the biggest thing. I often say to parents, talk off topic. So build conversation with your children now. That's why, again, with Lily and Daniel, I do that a lot, because I hope and pray that when they're teenagers, they still want to talk to me. Maybe they'll only grunt, but at least it'll be a grunt in my direction. And I think that's a key part, because that's about that consistency and taking that step forward.
Hannah, I don't know, you're obviously not a parent, but in modelling resilience, how do you think you could do that, or what are the challenges to that?
I think it means, it's about being authentic. I mean, partly, in our role at Phase, we talk about building resilience. We do the resilience workshops in year 7 and year 8. We're saying this is how you build resilience, here's some kind of strategies and stuff. And so I think actually it's important that we're living that out ourselves and can speak from a place of kind of putting those things in place. So, one of the things that we talk about is stepping outside of our comfort zone, and actually it's when we do that's when we kind of can grow. And yes, it might feel scary, but actually that's where we kind of can surprise ourselves. And I think, even yesterday when we were doing the assemblies, and speak to kind of 600 or 700 people, and again for me that felt out of my comfort zone, but I'm like, but I encourage, I teach on young people stepping out of their comfort zone, and so actually I need to be doing that myself. We talk about self-care and getting good sleep, exercising, eating well, managing the amount of time you're spending on social media, all of those things. Actually I need to kind of take a step back and think, okay, am I doing those things in my own life? So that I can be speaking from a place of kind of actually, I'm living this stuff out as well. And yes, it's not always easy, and yes, it takes practice, and no, sometimes, I need to make sure that I am kind of doing more exercise, or I am making sure that I'm getting good sleep. But just being real with them, I think, as well, is really important.
And it is about that vulnerability. It's like you said earlier, sometimes you see someone face the challenge and then you see how they come out, and you don't always know the process. And so I think it's important to an appropriate level that we're vulnerable with people, and we share with them the things that are difficult about that, but like what I'm doing, and talk that through with people so that they can see, that it's not just an overnight thing that I did, but I've put these things in place, and it's not always been easy, but this has been the outcome.
I think it's quite a countercultural thing. We just touched on social media there. The Instagram is often, is described as people's highlight reel. But I think as it creeps into our normal everyday life, where we don't allow people we just give an exterior, and we don't allow people into the interior. I know Brené Brown talks a lot about this, but vulnerability is so powerful, because I think it's when we are vulnerable, it pulls people in, lets people know, wow, okay, I feel that too, or I've been through that too. And again, Erica and I have talked about some of those life challenges of losing a parent. It's something that everyone's going to have at some point, and so it enables that open conversation.
But because social media is almost like the highlights reel, and it's also a dump of all the worst things that have ever happened to me, depending on how people use it. And so when we talk about vulnerability, I mean, sometimes that's okay and needed, but I think it's also about the vulnerability of, this is the challenge, but these are the things that I'm going to do, rather than just, this has been hard, and this has been hard, and this has been hard, and this has been hard. That, to me, that's not modelling resilience to people. It's about sharing those strategies as well. And that's vulnerable in itself. It's like, I actually have had to do, I'm not just super strong and resilient all the time. I've had to do these things, but sharing that with people.
And I think like vulnerability in the right context is actually just like a real, it takes courage, and it's a real strength, and it's not a weakness, but actually it is that strength to be able to let people in, or to be able to kind of let people see that kind of, interior part of you.
It's that reframing the British stiff upper lip, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that a good thing? It's not actually. Just hiding what you're thinking and feeling. Much more, takes more courage to admit and to ask for help. And I think that's, again, another parenting strategy is, I can't do this all for you, but I'm always here to help.
I was just thinking, because one of the things I am aware of, thinking about vulnerability, is that I don't always get parenting well. I don't always do it well. On the good days, I help my children be resilient. On the bad days, when times of pressure of trying to get out in the morning, any parent that's got small children will know that how can they do everything really fast, yet putting shoes on can take a lifetime. Those moments, actually, I realise that there's some of the pitfalls, some of the mistakes I make. Actually, that's where I'm not patient, or I solve it for them. I'll put the shoes on, I'll do this, I'll carry everything to the car. And that's that time pressure. Whereas, I realise, on my good days, actually, I'm helping them, I'm giving them a countdown and doing these other bits. I realise or if it's probably usually when I'm rushed, that's when my pitfalls come the most. And that's when I solve their problems, and that's when I do their stuff. Because it's basically, I'm feeling stressed, and so your problem is giving me more problems, and so I can get rid of your problems now. I can focus on my own. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. But that's just life, isn't it? Sometimes we're not always our best selves, and so we should be kind to ourselves. I think as long as overall picture is pretty good, don't worry too much about the mistake.
It's like not sweating the small stuff.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
And Hannah, well, we've all talked about it, about being authentic, but I guess the challenge of parenting is like being authentic all the time, because your kids are there all the time and they're watching all the time. And like a lot of that stuff you talked about earlier, the positive self-talk, the way you react to yourself when you make a mistake, that, it's impossible to do that right all the time and get that right all the time. So I imagine that's quite a challenge as a parent.
I'd say that as parents as well, you need to look after yourself first. It's like the aeroplane analogy. Put your own mask on first before you then put your children on. And I think you have to do that, because otherwise, if you're not being resilient yourself, if you're having issues or problems, then your children automatically pick up on that. So I quite often say to other parents, my friends, how do you make sure that you can present your best self, that you are being resilient, and being able to there are risk factors that happen, risk factors such as, you don't get a good night's sleep, you're not looking after yourself, you might have health problems. Those are the risk factors. But also, what are your protective factors? Being able to call a really good friend, having good relationships around you, getting exercise, eating well. Those are your protective factors. And the way I like to explain it, or get people to think about it, is a table. And you've got your 4 things, your 4 pillars, your 4 legs that are holding you up. What are those 4 most important things that keep you level? And so for me, there's sort of exercise. Getting lots of exercise really helps me it helps my mood, it helps my energy levels. Like well-being, all of these things that we're talking about today, making sure that I do them, keep on top of them. I like to stretch myself in knowledge. So I like to read, I like to listen to podcasts, etc. But also my relationships and friendships and my family. So for me, these are my sort of 4 table legs that keep me level and stable, so that I can then be my best self for the kids. But if one or other of them gets out of whack, or I neglect them, my tabletop starts to wobble. And if I totally knock one away, that's it, the table's on the floor. And so for me, I find that really useful, because it reminds me then that I need to keep up my exercise, because it's so much easier to just sit at home and watch something on TV than it is to go out for a run. And it's that I think that helps the stability, or gives you that stability in order to help others.
And then you're able to model it more authentically to your children as well.
Absolutely. Like, does that make sense?
No, that's great.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. I don't know if anyone else wants to share maybe what those 4 table legs would be for them. I'm just trying to think what mine might be.
I think for me, like, definitely one of those has to be faith. Like, I think faith as a Christian plays a massive part in my life. I think kind of knowing that God's constant, that even if stuff's changing around me, actually God's the same, and he's the same yesterday, today and forever, and actually I'm able to look back and see how God's been faithful in the past, how he's been with me in tough situations and hasn't left me, hasn't abandoned me, and I think that gives me that kind of trust to be able to look ahead and to go, okay God, like you're with me in this. And I think, just being able to read my Bible, to be able to pray, to be able to listen to worship music in that. But I think being reminded that God is constant, even if everything else around me is changing, and being able to hold on to that hope that I have as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'd say that's one for me as well. I guess when we're talking about resilience, it's hard to... Faith, if you have a faith, has to be a part of that. But for me as well, I know when I'm spending time with God and when I feel close to God, it roots me in my identity a lot more. I feel so much more secure about who I am. I'm not overthinking things. I'm not beating myself up over tiny things. I'm not putting that pressure on myself. I've got that like foundation of I know who I am and I feel kind of stable in that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Echo what all you guys said. I was just thinking of, my four table legs probably would be faith, family, friends, fitness. They're key parts to me. But part of I find definitely in the faith aspect is prayer. It gives me a way of externalizing thinking about stuff. Sometimes I don't. Even I talked about sharing with people. Sometimes I need to try and understand that for myself, and that's just what I use a lot of prayer for. Given that, again, it's that control. Understand that I can't control these things, and sometimes that externalising is a useful part for me to then be able to take it and share it with some friends, share it with my family, or just be aware. I think like you're saying there, Hannah, that sense of hope, and I think that's a key part of resilience. Whether you've got a faith or not, having some hope, and maybe that hope is that actually it will get better, even if today it's darkest before the dawn. Actually, I think hope, however you have it, for me it's in Christianity, but having hope is a real big aspect to resilience.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all that you guys have shared, and it's been such an interesting conversation. I wondered, just to wrap up and to finish, if you could share one thing that you've found interesting or that you're going to take away with you and think about a little bit more or put into action out of all the things that we have talked about.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the sense of that resilience. It's a daily journey, and maybe today I feel quite resilient, tomorrow I might not, but it's about understand that taking those proactive steps forward with those around me.
And I agree with that. I think it's something that you do need to work on. It can be learnt, it can be built. There was a really lovely quote that I came across actually when I was thinking about today, from Matt Haig. The bottom of the valley is never the best, provides the clearest view. And I think sometimes when you're in that dip, it's hard to see your way back out again, but once you get to the top, that's it. You can see, and everything seems to make sense.
Yeah, again, I think a reminder that actually resilience is just that continual journey. It's something we're continually building, we're continually learning, growing through all our different experiences that we have, and to not think we have to do it alone, but to allow others in on that journey as well.
Yeah, I like that. I think for me, it's just that it's kind of reassuring to hear everybody agree that we think we can be resilient in some situations and not in others, because sometimes, especially, working with young people and talking about resilience, and then you have a situation where you feel like you're not very resilient, and I'm like, oh no, I'm actually not very resilient. But recognising that just because it might be lower in one area doesn't mean that I don't have those skills in other areas and I can't grow in it and learn in it, like you've all said. Well, thank you so much. That's been such an interesting chance for conversation. I feel like I've got loads to take away and think about. So thank you all very much for your time.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.